Mr. LaSala, what was the purpose of your visit to Smithfield in October 2012?
Well, you see, the reason that I went there, originally I spent 10 years at the Coal Mine Substance Insurance Fund. That's a job that I took right out of school. Not a bad job, though, but it was a private fund that was put in place by the state. That was done because, you see, in the state of Columbia, we've got over 1 million acres of undermined land. And unfortunately for us, something like 73% of that land in the state is underlaid by coal, and we got new coal mines coming in here really all the time. And see, we're a state that's always had a lot of subsidence. It really started in about 1840. And we'd have no idea where it was. We'd run into something, and all of a sudden a hole would open up, like in Belleville, for example, which is a nice little town. It's got kind of an old town. In general, I think that's sort of the nature of where all of this comes from, and historically, it's honestly it's been very interesting.
I'm object to the responsiveness of the answer and move to strike is unresponsive to the question.
I disagree. We believe it is responsive.
Let me try again then. Mr. LaSala, would you tell me, when you went to Smithfield in October 2012, what was your purpose in going there?
Right. Well, like I said, there's this subsidence problem in Columbia. We just have always had a lot of coal mines because there is so much underground in the state of Columbia.
Mr. LaSala, now I want you to listen to my question very carefully, because I'm not trying to trick you. I'm just trying to get some information.
Okay.
Did you go to a meeting in Smithfield in October 2012?
Yes.
And who was there?
Steve was there, my supervisor. There were a bunch of people there. It's a big room. It was a cold day.
And where was the location of the meeting?
It was at our offices, my employer's offices.
In Smithfield?
In Smithfield.
Now, listen to my question again. This is what my question's all about. What was the purpose of the meeting? What was the agenda? Why was the meeting called?
Oh, the purpose? Yeah, well, again, like I was saying, there is a lot of coal mines in this state. I mean, historically, it's just always been that way, right? So
I'm going to interpose an objection and move to strike that your answer is still non-responsive as to why the meeting was held.
Well, of course, I would point out that you interrupted the witness before he got a chance to respond to the question. So,
right. So, I think the history of this is interesting and important. Like I was saying, in 1840, the way that we started to mine, it was very different than the way they used to do it before that. But and in 1840, when they started mining this way, it really changed everything. And I think it exacerbated the subsidence problem that exists in this state. And as a result, there's this heightened sense of awareness about that problem in our state. So, of course, that factors into the equation when you discuss things like this and the problem that we had here. So,
does that complete your answer?
What was the question?
The question was, what was the purpose of the meeting in Smithfield in October 2012?
Among other things, we were talking about the subsidence problem that exists in this state, and our state has an awful lot of coal mines, and it's been over the years. There's been these mom and pop organizations. There's been more formal operations that do.
Paul, we saw more action from George in this last vignette than from you. What were you thinking about as your witness was rattling along there?
Well, that would be a disaster from my standpoint. I never want my witness rattling on and being obviously non-responsive. I would, in reality, ask my witness to please listen to the question and answer the question. If that was unsuccessful, I would probably ask for a break, go go out, speak with the witness, and tell them to directly answer the question. First, I don't want them volunteering information that isn't asked, and that's important to me. And second, when a witness is non-responsive, like this witness was, it hurts their credibility, and that doesn't help anybody.
So you would have made the request to your witness to be more direct in answering the question right on the record with George sitting there and the reporter and so forth?
I would.
And George seemed pretty frustrated, but even though he was frustrated, that it didn't make you happy either.
No, again, it's not how frustrating it is to the opposing counsel. I'm always got my eye on how that witness is going to be received by a jury ultimately, and I don't want my witnesses doing that. And second, by volunteering information, that's dangerous. While he's going on and on and on, he very well could end up volunteering information that could end up hurting the case, and I just don't like that.
Okay. George, in the real world, would you have done what you did here, or would you have let the witness just kind of prattle along and with the idea that if he just keeps talking, you'll learn more and maybe he'll say something harmful to his side of the case?
I would have made that decision as he talked, depending on the issues he addressed. For example, if the subsidence in the area was an issue in the lawsuit, well, I may let him go on and on about that.
But in terms of what we saw here, would you have, once you got to the point where he's talking about things that were of no interest, you would have continued to try to discipline him and get him back on the subject?
And again, playing it by ear, because each one's different. You know, as we talked earlier, I try not to alienate the witness, even though he's the adversary, because my experience is you get a lot more information if you're a professional and your demeanor is more personal than adversarial.
In this kind of a situation, it sounds like Paul was thinking along the same lines you were for somewhat different reasons. Would you ever kind of appeal to your opponent, either on the record or off the record, and say, do you want to confer with the witness and see if we can move things along?
I have done that. And it depends on who the attorney on the other side is as well. If it's somebody you can work with, that's usually the most expeditious way of handling it.
Paul, if you were on the other side of the table and you were trying to get this question answered from by this witness, is there any kind of advice you could give to lawyers who are in their first 3-4 years of practice about how you get this kind of a witness to actually answer the question?
Yes, I usually call it an escalating scale, and I will always start off again. I couldn't agree more that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, so I'll start off a very polite way and maybe say to the witness, I appreciate you telling me whatever he's told you that's non-responsive, but here's my question. Now, if the witness continues to be non-responsive, then I'll step it up a scale and say, now, this is my question, and repeat that question to them. And if they continue to be unresponsive at that point, and a technique that I have actually used and will use again is if it's an important question and I need an answer to that question, then I'll write that question out on a pad. And so it's in black and white so that everybody can see the same question at the same time. And then I will ask that witness to answer the question. And finally, if they don't answer it at that point, then I will conclude by saying, well, it's one thing we can be clear about, and that is that you are not going to answer that question. And am I correct about that?
Paul, would you mark that piece of paper that where you wrote out the question? Would you mark that as an exhibit to the deposition?
I certainly would, and particularly if it wasn't videotaped. Most of the depositions that I take, I will videotape them so that everybody is watching the same thing at the same time. Whether I'm using that deposition to display that testimony in front of the jury or using it for impeachment purposes, but I definitely would mark it as an exhibit.
Yeah, it's one I never heard of before.